RE2, we are back, of course, talking some Remake Part 3, and we have yet another leak involving the game over on 4chan. It's been a while since we did a leak video regarding Part 3. I think it's been almost 3 months. It was like back in February when we looked at one. I will say this leak has some things that are interesting about it. It's also very specific in what it describes as happening supposedly in the game. Whereas some of the other leaks we looked at in the past, whether that's for Rebirth before we got to Rebirth or for the third game, they can be like very basic shit like, the game will be bigger. You can fly the Highwind. Mini games. You get to play as Sid, Vincent, Zack. Like things that are very, very much expected with like a couple of interesting other details thrown in. With this leak, we have a supposed title for the third game, which the previous leak we looked at a few months ago didn't have. It describes a couple different elements about the game that are new, like very new. But about half of it is described in one particular section of supposedly the third game. That is a little more intricate, more detailed. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's true, but it's like it's a lot of effort to go through instead of just doing the generic, like, expected things that we're going to be seeing in the third game. Let's just hop into it. So they titled the thread, I'm playing an early test build of FF7R Part 3. So the first piece of info is the title. They say Part 3 will tentatively be called Reclaim. So Reclaim is definitely one that I've heard. I don't know where that falls in line with, like, the popularity of RE's subnames for the third game, but it's one I've heard. Obviously, like, Return is a popular one. Reborn's one that's a bit speculated. Requiem, I think, is a very popular one as well. People still say Reunion. It's not going to happen. Let it go. We also say that it's tentatively called Reclaim. So if we're just going to, for the sake of conversation, say that this leak's real. Right now, it could be called Reclaim, but, you know, by the time we actually get to the marketing and stuff for the third game, it might have a different subname. But according to them, right now, it's Reclaim. Reclaim is definitely a good subname for the third game. It can work in multiple ways. You know, Cloud reclaiming his truth, reclaiming his past, right? Sephiroth reclaiming the black material, also maybe reclaiming the planet because he thinks it's etc. or whatever the fuck. You can also look at it like, if you want to go even deeper with it, I guess, like the planet reclaiming the planet itself from the people by releasing the weapons. Like, you can go probably so many different ways with the word reclaim if you wanted to make it make sense for the FF7 story. We also know that these subtitles for these games have like multiple meanings. The thing is, I don't know if reclaim works in the same way that like remake and rebirth kind of work in terms of like, you know, making something again, right? Rebirthing something. Reclaiming something, I guess you're getting something with that. So it's also in like a kind of a meta sense, it's us like reclaiming the FF7 story, right? It's the third part of the game. I don't know. So the next piece of info says, the intro starts with Red 13 looking at a futuristic city that resembles Galbadia Garden from FF8's alternate future, maybe. I mean, what else would it be, right? If this is true, if this is a real thing that's in the third game, like, there's no futuristic cities outside of maybe Midgar, I guess. Midgar, Junon, those are the only ones, right? Neither one of them look anything like Galbadia Garden from FF8. And my first thought with this was that maybe they were talking about Neo Midgar, right? Which we have seen Shinra's depiction of in Remake with the VR section in the Shinra building, right? And then maybe we're seeing like an alternate timeline where Neo Midgar actually came to fruition, right? But the problem is, they say Galbadia Garden. And the issue with that is that Galbadia Garden is a gigantic bright red building in FF8 that looks nothing like Neo Midgar. So part of me wonders if they didn't potentially mix up gardens from FF8, because if it's just an alternate timeline with a futuristic red building, like, that means nothing to me. Like, what does that tell me? It tells me goddamn nothing, right? Now, if they meant to say Balam Garden or Balam Garden, however you say that shit, like, that's at least a lot closer in look to Neo Midgar. Like, putting these two side by side, they are extremely similar, right? To the point that it makes sense that there's an alternate timeline, potentially. One of the worlds out there within the planet where maybe Neo Midgar was actually created, right? But again, a red building, red futuristic building tells me nothing. I guess it's also possible that it could be Neo Midgar in a different timeline, and it's just a different color, potentially. I can't think of any, like, big red buildings in, like, FF7 that have any significance. Is there anything in the lore anywhere of gigantic red buildings, futuristic buildings? I got nothing. There is a new stamp, not a dog expert, but it looks very similar to the female dog from Lady and the Tramp, and it has a bunch of stars around its collar. So this is the female dog Lady from Lady and the Tramp. This is a Cocker Spaniel. This is what they claim the new stamp dog looks like, and they do mention that it having multiple stars on its collar, which does tell us something if it's true. These are the stamps that we have so far when it comes to FF7 Rebirth, and they range from 3 to 6 stars, 3 on the Chihuahua, 4 on the Terrier, 5 on the Beagle, 6 on the Pug. And I thought we didn't know the actual number for the Corgi, but it turns out we do. With the original scene in FF7 Rebirth, when we see Johnny run by, he's holding the Corgi stamp doll, but you don't get any meaningful look at it, so we don't know how many stars it has. But obviously the game is on PC these days, and we do have free cams, and it turns out there is actually stars modeled on the Corgi, which is pretty interesting. And there are 7 stars, which is the highest so far. When it came to the Corgi, before we obviously had the free cam, it was either going to be a higher number, so 7 or some other higher number for some reason, or is going to be 1 or 2 star, and obviously they went the route of 7 stars. And this person's claim is that on the collar of this supposed other stamp, the Cocker Spaniel, there's a bunch of stars, which would be more than 1, more than 2. And if that were to be true, then that means it'd probably be like an 8-star stamp, which I just don't think they would do. For starters, I don't think they just keep going up and up and up in stars, right? Like, we still have a 1 and 2 star stamp supposedly to see if we're going to see, all of them. So I don't think they'd just be going up to like 8, 9, and 10 star stamps and all this other shit. Also, when it comes to most Final Fantasy games, there are allusions to their number within the game, right? A few quick examples, of course, in FF7, we have the Lucky Sevens. In Final Fantasy VIII, you have Squall's, Renzo, Kuki, and Limit Break. If you hit all the actual hits with R1, I think there's 8 of them. In Final Fantasy IX, Zidane has an attack called Solution 9. In Final Fantasy X, there's 10 different Aeons if you count the Magus Sisters as individual Aeons. A couple of quick examples, there's often multiple allusions to their number in the Final Fantasy games. I don't know if this is standard across the board. I don't know if every single numbered entry has allusions to their number, but generally speaking, with the ones that I've played, there is. I bring that up because I don't know if they would go beyond like a 7-star stamp when it comes to the remake trilogy, right? More than likely, that's the maximum, and then we just need to see stamp 1 and 2. They could certainly do it. They could go beyond 7, but most likely, that's probably the max. So me personally, I call a little bit of BS on this particular piece of info that there's like an 8-star or higher stamp that we're going to see in the next game. Not impossible. I just call BS on it because we still need to see 1 and 2. And I don't know that they're going to be showing us just a bunch of stamps again in the third game. Like we got the 1 or 2, I guess, with the first game, right? Because we do see the Terrier at the end. Rebirth introduced us to 3 more stamps, right? So we're up to 5 now, highest being 7. As for like, if we're going to see more, we're just going to see the 2 that we've yet to see, right? 1-star and 2-star. And at the end of Rebirth, we do see Zack wake up in what is potentially a different world, potentially the 1-star or 2-star world, or I guess this theoretical Cocker Spaniel 8-star world. The player does not control Cloud, at least not in the part I played. Instead, you control Tifa, and Cloud just does his own thing, and he's overpowered as fuck, like Sephiroth was in Nibelheim. This part's a little bit weird, because I'm not entirely sure what to say. Like, is it possible there's a segment in the third game where we control Tifa, and Cloud's just following us as like AI or whatever, and he's really, really strong? Maybe. I don't really know why he'd be like overpowered like Sephiroth was with the Nibelheim shit, other than the black materia that he has at the end of Rebirth, which they do kind of touch on a little bit later with the stuff we're going to look at. Unless that's like making Cloud stronger for some reason. I don't know why he wouldn't be just as strong as he was in Rebirth. But obviously getting Control Tifa would be great for the Tifa fans out there. We know we're going to get that at some point in the third game, obviously whenever Cloud goes away to Medeal or whatever, right? When he's in his like Mako poisoning state, like at some point we're going to control Tifa. So that's definitely going to be a thing in the third game. Will they do it multiple times? I don't know. The game starts in Zack's world, and the tutorial is basically Zack fighting monsters in Sector 5 with some dude wearing a red anime trench coat. His belt is like Zack and Cloud, so he must be a soldier. So I've had some issues with aspects of this leak up to this point, right? But when we get to this particular piece of info is where I think it falls into probably a fake leak, because it's your standard like Genesis bait leak that we've seen in other like leaks before in the past, right? Like Genesis is gonna be in the game. People hate the character of Genesis. Let's get people talking about this leak because Genesis is involved. Like they're trying to act like they don't know who Genesis is for some reason. They say it's a guy in a red anime trench coat with a similar belt to Cloud and Zack, so he's got to be a member of Soldier. Just say Genesis. Like you're clearly trying to bait people into talking about it. This is kind of a running theme with this particular leak where they tried to seem like they don't know information that's in Crisis Core, because obviously they're trying to act like they don't know who Genesis is, but they also talk about Modeoheim. It's a big part of this leak. But they just call it like a location called Modeoheim as opposed to the location that we're very aware of if you've played Crisis Core. As for the game opening up with us controlling Zack fighting monsters in Sector 5, is that possible? I guess. We kind of already did that a bit with Rebirth, right? The game opens up with us controlling Zack and saving Aerith and shit. Will they go the route of opening up the game again with Zack? Possibly. After that, you're in Cloud's world, and they encounter a storm which forces Sid to land. They end up in a place called Modeoheim. It's snowy there like Icicle Inn, but the whole place looks like a research facility with scientists everywhere. Avalanche is there too, so I don't know if the scientists are actually working for Shinra, but it's hard to know without English lines. I've discussed in the past about the possibility of Modeoheim being in the third game. Partially, I think it should be there because it's kind of significant to the history of Cloud and Zack. That's where they meet each other, right, when it comes to Crisis Core. But also, they kind of needed to flesh out the Icicle Inn area, because with the original game, there's really nothing there. It's just Icicle Inn, right? You have Chocobo Sage's house kind of like hidden in the mountains a little bit, and then it's just, Great Glacier, Guy's Cliff, and all that other shit leading to the North Crater, right? Like, that's really all that's there, so they kind of need locations like Modeoheim that are in the lore in the past with Crisis Core to kind of give more to that location in the modern day. Do I think Modeoheim will be in the third game? I'm fairly certain of it. I don't see why they wouldn't include it. I don't know exactly what you do with the location, though. Will it be this according to this leak? I'm a little bit skeptical. When it comes to the town itself of Modeoheim, it's long abandoned, right? It's a ghost town. Every building's like destroyed and shit, right? So there's nothing really of use itself within the town, so I'm not really sure why people would use it as like a base of operations or something in the third game. There is an abandoned reactor in the area where the Genesis Army and Dr. Hollander are hiding, so it's possible this is where the person could be talking about. I'm also a bit unsure how the person knows for sure that it's Modeoheim and for sure that it's Avalanche, but unsure whether or not the scientists are related to Shinra. Like, when it comes to Modeoheim, there could at least be like a sign outside the village or something that says Modeoheim or something, right? Like, that's pretty obvious. But how do they know for sure that it's Avalanche and are unclear on the Shinra thing? They say they're unsure on this stuff because there isn't any English lines, right? They're probably playing the game in Japanese, but like, is there a sign somewhere in the area that says Avalanche Hideout or something? Like, I don't know how they know it's Avalanche. For the beginning part of that particular piece of info, us having to like emergency land because of a storm or something in the Icicle Inn area, that could definitely happen. Whether or not we start at Modeoheim or somewhere else, we'll see. The research town also has a Mako reactor, and those black robes are everywhere. They have a scientist researching them, and his name appears on screen as that, which he says is Chromista. He seems to be interested in Cloud. So again, I'm a little bit skeptical here, because how does this person have this supposed character's Japanese name to be able to throw out there, but can't decipher whether or not Shinra was involved with the previous thing we looked at? A little bit weird. You don't speak Japanese, but you just happen to remember that name in Japanese. I call bullshit on that. Now, as for there being black robes in the area, I mean, that makes some sense. I don't know if there was actually black robes off the top of my head in like Icicle Inn. Maybe there's like one somewhere in the town. I don't know. But obviously, we're very close to the North Crater, which is where the reunion is going to happen. So I imagine with the third game, they're definitely going to put a bunch of black robes in that area because we're getting closer and closer, right? So that's not really a surprise to me if that were to be the case. As for the scientist, which they say is like Chromista, there is a character from On the Way to a Smile named like Killmister, that it maybe could be. He's an ex-Shinra scientist, a former assistant to Professor Hojo. He's studying aspects of geostigma and stuff like that. So maybe it's possible. The names aren't super similar, but they're close enough that maybe there could be like a translation error here on this person's end, potentially. I don't know. And they can maybe repurpose what this character does in On the Way to a Smile to put them retroactively into FF7. We'll see on that as well. Anyway, after doing a few side quests, the scientists let you go down to the caves. It starts out like the Mithril Mine, but the cave becomes more icy and crystalline the deeper you go. This one, there's not like a ton of information here. I mean, I don't know how much people get to play when they test like early builds of games, right? Because this person's claiming they got to see like the beginning of the game with Zack and potentially Genesis fighting, doing missions, fighting monsters, whatever. And then also got to jump forward at some point to controlling just Tifa, not Cloud. Getting to run around Modeoheim, progressing the story what seems like a decent amount, getting to do side quests. I'm like, I don't know on that. That's a lot to do. Maybe that you get to play that much. I don't know. I've never tested an early build of a game. But they also mentioned going into a cave, which isn't a thing with Modeoheim that we know of from Crisis Core. Now, there is 300 missions in Crisis Core, right? And it's possible that one of the many missions you go on where you're in a cave, it's meant to be in the Modeoheim area. I can't really speak on that. But at least with like the story segments we get in Modeoheim, there's no cave. Could that be different in Remake Part 3? You're damn right it could be. There could absolutely be a cave in the Modeoheim area and the Icicle Inn area. We'll see on that. But I'm just going off of the information that we do have. And then the last step here, they say, at the end of the cave, dome-shaped chamber with Sephiroth's forming body in the middle, Rufus, Scarlet, and Hojo are already there examining it. Upon seeing it, Cloud goes into a trance and walks up Sephiroth's body and stabs it, at which point the materia of the sword glows red and his sword shatters into pieces. Then the ground begins to shake and the weapons start crawling out of the ground. Everyone escapes but Tifa and Cloud. I'll update with more later. So there's kind of a lot to go over here. So their first claim is that at the end of this cave that we went into in Modeoheim, at the end of this cave is Sephiroth's body, which very much changes where it was in the original game, where we find Sephiroth in the North Crater, right? It's where the weapons themselves emerge from the North Crater itself, the fucking gigantic hole, right? So I don't know where they'd be emerging from this random cave that's supposedly in the Modeoheim area. Like, are these gigantic kaiju monsters just walking through the cave with us behind us? Are they digging through the fucking ground? Like, how are they getting to the surface? That doesn't make any damn sense. But to kind of play a little bit of devil's advocate, Sephiroth's body is like, deep underground, and it's just like in the North Continent, right? So you could kind of put that anywhere you wanted to. It doesn't necessarily have to be the North Cave, potentially, though that is kind of integral to like the story and the plot of FF7. And it's also possible they'd want to maybe save the North Cave, North Crater dungeon for like the end of the game, as opposed to us going there, leaving, doing a bunch of shit, and then coming back there at the end of the game, right? That's just me trying to make sense of this. I doubt this would be the case. But their other claim is that once we get down into the cave where Sephiroth's body is, Rufus, Scarlet, and Hojo are already there, which is how it is in the original game with the North Crater, right? Once we get to where Sephiroth is encased and the weapons behind the wall where you see the eyeball and shit, like those three are already there. So that adds up to what the original game is. But it doesn't make sense based on the other shit we've talked about so far. Remember that we are told by this person that this location is occupied by Avalanche and scientists that are maybe not attached to Shinra. And we had to do side quests for these scientists to get access to this cave where Rufus, Scarlet, and Hojo are. Something's not really adding up there because we have Avalanche members there with Shinra employees. Unless they're trying to say like this Avalanche group that's here is working with Shinra, which would be kind of weird. But also, like, if there are scientists there and we have Shinra employees down in the cave, would that not imply that the scientists themselves are Shinra employees, potentially? Like, the only way that it sort of makes sense, potentially, is if it's, like, a reference to the fact that, like, Rufus has helped Avalanche in the past, right? That's, like, a thing from, you know, I think, like, before Crisis or some shit, where they, like, try to help. I think he funded some Avalanche shit. He tried to help, like, get President Shinra assassinated, if I'm not mistaken. Something along those lines. I don't know all the lore. This is just something I'm kind of aware of. Like, maybe that's what it's trying to reference or something. I don't entirely know. But at the same time, you also have Hojo and Scarlet there who are very much going to be anti-Avalanche. So, like, something here's not really adding up. It just sounds like some more bullshit to me. And actually, kind of hopping back to the beginning of this piece of info, they say that Sephiroth's body is in, like, a dome-shaped chamber, which I think is kind of like what they have Genova in the original game in the Shinra building, right? Like, it sounds like something that's man-made that Sephiroth's body's inside of. It'd be kind of weird. I much more prefer the, like, fucking Mako stasis kind of, like, natural forming thing that he's inside of when it comes to original FF7. So this is something that if it happened to be true in Remake Part 3, I just wouldn't like it, because why the hell would you change that? Anyways, their next claim is that Cloud sees Sephiroth, gets into a trance, walks up to the chamber, stabs the body, the black materia makes his sword glow red for some reason, and then his sword fucking explodes into pieces. So I've already been a little bit skeptical on some of the shit in this leak up to this point, right? But this is where you absolutely lose me, because their claim is that somewhere towards the beginning of the game, Cloud's iconic Buster Sword would get destroyed. So you think they would go the rest of Part 3 without Cloud having his iconic weapon? Because I highly fucking doubt that. The only possible way that it could work is if they have Cloud get another Buster Sword from one of these other worlds, right? Which is maybe possible. We've seen the white materia thing towards the end of Rebirth where, you know, Cloud and Aerith go on their little date thing or whatever, and she gives him the white materia that's now full that he brings into the main timeline, right? So maybe it's possible that at some point in the game, if his sword was to get destroyed, that he could maybe get another Buster Sword from, like, Zack or something like that. That's the only way it could work. And I'm honestly not even entirely against the idea, because it'd be kind of interesting to see them have the balls to do something like that. Because if you break the Buster Sword towards the beginning of the game, people are going to be like, what the fuck? I want to use the Buster Sword through my entire playthrough, or something along those lines, right? And people wouldn't expect to maybe be able to use it ever again throughout the game. But I'm not entirely sure if they'd have the balls to make a move like that. But we have seen, to a certain degree, them taking inspiration from the MCU, even though they're not really doing, like, the multiverse shit in the same way. And we've actually seen that in the MCU with, you know, fucking Hela destroying Thor's, you know, Mjolnir, and then him getting it later on with Endgame with time travel stuff. So I could see them ripping that right from Marvel, but we'll see. Last claim here is that after Cloud's sword is destroyed, the weapons emerge from the planet, everybody escapes except for Tifa and Cloud. So the implication here would be that Tifa and Cloud get swept away in the live stream instead of just Cloud this time, which is a little bit interesting. There is something pretty interesting here where the group as a whole loses Cloud and Tifa, not just Cloud this time. They don't know where they're at. They're just lost. We gotta find them at some point, right? It does fuck up the, like, Shinra capture scene that we got in the original game where they try to, like, kill Tifa and also Bear, right? They try to execute them live on TV. Like, that's completely gone if Tifa's not a part of the group when they get captured by Shinra, right? Also, it fucks up the Tifa Scarlet slap fight that happens on Junon, but I guess technically you could do that sort of anywhere. But to kind of counteract that, the execution scene or whatever, that can be any character. It could just be Barrett this time instead of Tifa that's in the chamber. It doesn't have to be Tifa, right? So they could maybe switch that up. But with Tifa and Cloud being lost in the planet together, I don't know how that would fuck up, like, the Medeal segment and kind of the whole live stream sequence as a whole, right? Because you get emotional moments of Cloud, like, in a, you know, almost a comatose state or whatever, the Mako poisoning state in the wheelchair, and, like, Tifa being sad about that shit, and, like, our group has got to go on a quest over here doing this shit while Tifa stays behind with Cloud. Like, you kind of lose all that if they're both just in the live stream together already. So I don't know. It kind of ruins the impact of that moment, which isn't unheard of. We've seen them kind of ruin the dying scene too. So I guess lastly, the person says they'll update with more information later. So if there's another leak at some point potentially, I guess we'll maybe cover it. But that is pretty much the video, my dudes. What are your thoughts? I had zero plans on the video being this long, but I also wanted to break down and talk about this shit as much as we possibly could. It's been a while since we did a leak video anyways. Of course, when it comes to any leak like this, like, I'm very, very skeptical to the point that I usually don't think that they're legit. And I certainly don't think this is legit. But like I said towards the beginning of the video, like, it's a little more in depth than what normal leaks have. Like, they give us a decent section of what is supposedly this Modeoheim segment, and, like, kind of beat by beat shit that happens in the story, which you don't usually get. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's real at all, but it's definitely more effort put into it than what you see from some other leaks with generic fucking information, right? Regardless of the legitimacy of this leak, I'll definitely keep some of this information in mind on the off chance that it ends up being true, because that'd be pretty fucking wild if it was. Anyways, that's the video. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new, so in the description below. Follow me on Twitter, @YT. That's it. Bye.
Used to care what people thought. but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame, we blow that. Like Coltrane, we in here. Like Logain, or leave it. Like Cobain.